My first boyfriend broke up with me right after getting out of prison, turned around and became someone else's husband with a happy family of 3. Those sweet memories turned out to be lies, charity, revenge. As I lay dying, he knelt by the bed crying uncontrollably. Before my morning alarm went off, Mark sneaked in and lay beside me. I was already awake when he entered. I've been having trouble sleeping lately, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling empty and suffocated in the dark room. Mark is at the club with his good buddy Ethan, often not coming back until dawn. I waited a long time, but he didn't pull me into his arms. Since when did we stop falling asleep with him holding me tight from behind? A week ago, or 5 years ago? 5 years ago, that night, I was drugged and felt like I was falling into an abyss. I struggled, in pain, praying that Mark would come save me. But all I could hear on the phone was loud music and laughter. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later, the painkillers spreading rapidly through my bloodstream, a slight feeling of pain making me realize I was still alive. Ethan came over to ask a bunch of questions when he saw me awake, but there was no sign of Mark around. Weakly, I asked, "Where's Mike?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. "Mark got into a fight at a bar for another guy. The guy died, and Mark went in." My heart sank. "Went in where?" My voice trembled. Ethan hurried to reassure me. "Grace, you're just recovering. Don't get upset. Please listen to me. Let's focus on getting better, okay?" I was angry. I wished it had been him to come and save me, not there trying to be a hero in a dance floor, only to make a mistake and end up inside. In the following 5 years, I was denied visits by him. I could only write letters to him pouring out my endless yearning, yet he didn't reply to a single one. Last week, when he was released from prison, as I stood at the prison gate to meet him, I saw no joy of rebirth, no excitement of reunion, only weariness and indifference on his face. He doesn't cuddle me to sleep anymore, avoids me in front of others, very little physical contact between us. He wouldn't hold my face in his hands, always saying he's busy. I wanted to ask him, why did he hang up? Why was he so heartless to avoid me? Am I really important to him? But I'm afraid to know the answers, deceiving myself that none of this matters as long as he's by my side. I turned over. "Did I wake you up?" Mark's deep voice came, smelling of cigarettes, something he never used to smoke before. "Seems like he's changed a lot in these 5 years." I murmured, "No, I just can't sleep well without you." "Grace, let's break up," he said, pushing me away, his face sincere, making me lift my head in disbelief, thinking he was joking, but he was serious, pushing me away again. "This joke is not funny at all." I struggled to hold back my trembling voice, trying to hug him again. "I'm serious. I don't love you anymore." He frowned, pushing me away once more, deciding not to sleep, started packing his things. I panicked, got up to grab him, still immersed in the idea that this was a prank or a lie. "Mark, it's not April Fool's, you can't fool me." But deep down, I felt guilty. I had sensed his change ever since he came back a month ago from prison. Vigorously shaking off my hand, he looked at me fiercely. "I realized my mom was right. Being with you makes things difficult. I want a new life, and I've been thinking about this more and more. Let's just call it quits." The one who secretly gave me medicine for my injured hand, wandered around the city with me on subways, said he wanted to marry me, was not in front of me now. The brother who never looked down on me, always held me carefully, carried me to the hospital in the snow, thinking I was dying, crying and begging the doctor to save my sister. Tears streaming down my face, I shook my head. "You're lying, you're so mean." I almost believed it. He stood at the door holding a suitcase, resolutely saying, "Don't look for me anymore, let's leave it at this." Watching his back, I had thought that with his release from prison, we could live our dream life, get married and grow old together. Where did it all go wrong? The next few days, I couldn't reach him on the phone and went to their club to find him. Ethan hesitated. "He hasn't been coming to work recently. Don't come looking for him, it's dangerous here." I asked with a smile, "Is he avoiding me?" Once, when I was sent to the countryside by his mom, he rode his bike through the night to find me and got half beaten by his mom, who called him a traitor for coming back for me. But now I've been abandoned by him. I don't understand. Can't even accept this outcome. Our next meeting was at the hospital. During a company health checkup, he was holding a pink bag in the elevator, accompanied by a woman. In that moment, he seemed to show some unfamiliar emotions in his eyes upon seeing me, then quickly turned away like a stranger. By the time we got to the 4th floor, he helped the woman off the elevator. A colleague said, "So jealous, husband accompanying her for prenatal checkups." When I was pregnant with my first, I had to go alone the whole time. I stood frozen, asking the colleague to explain. The couple who just got off on the maternity floor. A pregnant woman needs her husband's care and support. The words pregnant woman stabbed into my ears like a sharp gust of wind. I had imagined countless times what Mark would be like as a father, never thinking he'd have a child with someone else. The colleague helped me into the emergency room, the noisy cries for help echoing in my ears, the lights of the hospital swaying wildly. I heard Mark's voice. Grace, what do you want again? Grace, are you tired of this? I woke up in the hospital bed with my colleague Helen by my side. She breathed a sigh of relief. If you didn't wake up soon, I might have gone to call the doctor again. Grace, even though you're young, you still need to take care of yourself. Can't be like this anymore. Helen's concern warmed my heart. Since joining the company, she had always taken care of me like a real sister. Oh, those two people in the elevator were your brother and sister-in-law. Why didn't you say hi? I sat up on the bed in silence. It was only a few days since I broke up with my boyfriend. Your brother knew you needed first aid. The doctor said it was okay, and then he left. Helen helped me up and knelt down to put shoes on me. I felt embarrassed and said I could do it myself, but she firmly pressed down my foot. Keep in touch with your family more. Sit down and talk about any conflicts. After all, your family. I nodded. I messaged Mark. Let's meet up. He replied an hour later. My girlfriend is not feeling well. I have to stay home with her. It had only been a few days since we broke up, and he had already found someone new. I continued typing. When are you free then? I don't think we have much to talk about. My girlfriend is pregnant, and she wouldn't be happy if she saw me with another woman. Another woman. I remembered that time when we were shopping, and I saw Mark giving his contact information to a few female students. He said something and they glanced at me, pouting before walking away. Later, I asked what he had said. He just smiled and said, I told them my girlfriend doesn't allow me to chat with other women. On my birthday, during my first year of college, he was away on a business trip. While I regretted that he couldn't be with me to celebrate, he called me huffing and puffing, honey, happy birthday. Then I felt myself enveloped in a warm hug, his warm breath on my head as I buried it in his chest. Only separated for a few days. Why did I miss him so much? I love you, he whispered softly in my ear. He brought me to dinner with his friends, proudly saying, this is my girlfriend. He knew I often had stomach pains, and always reminded me to eat on time. Yesterday felt like a dream, and I was reluctant to wake up, immersed in those sweet memories, struggling bitterly. If Mark didn't show up, I would go to the club every day to wait for him. Ethan couldn't stand my persistence, and called him to come. Standing at the club's entrance, he jeered, Grace, why are you so shameless? People passing by threw me strange glances. He put out his cigarette nonchalantly and laughed. I can't stand people like you, who cling on to me like a leech. Just like 12 years ago, you shamelessly stuck by our family's side. Back then, you were just a stand-in for Kathy, my little sister, whose mother had passed away. You were there to stand in for her. Then you said you fell for me, and I thought having someone who wanted me wasn't bad. He spoke lightly of our 12 years together. He was a player of the chessboard, a giver, while I was just a substitute. I stood there with tears in my eyes, desperately searching for even a hint of sincerity. But why did the man, who once held me in the palm of his hand, seem so fed up? The first time I met Mark, I was called Grace. He had a cheerful, smiling mother, a mischievous and lovely sister, and a humorous father. And I only had my mother. My father had sacrificed himself on duty when I was 1 year old, and my father and Mark's father were good friends, brothers in arms. As far back as I could remember, his father would often come from City A to visit us. Since I had no memories of my biological father, I always felt like Mark was my dad. He would bring a bunch of snacks and say with a smile, my big brother at home can protect Grace. It wasn't until I was 8 and moved to City A with my mother that I first met Mark. On an autumn evening, Mark's family knocked on the door of our new home. The whole family gave their blessings in unison, the adults busy moving housewarming gifts and bonsai, and I noticed Mark holding his little sister's hand. He stood at the door and smiled at me. 3-year-old Kathy trotted over and said, Grace, hello. She blinked her eyes, really cute, and their family seemed so happy. Over time, our families often visited each other, and my mother and I both had friends we could talk to. I thought we would always be happy, but when I saw Kathy lying on the ground, Mark's parents wailing in agony, and my mother in a panic, I knew that happiness might fly away. Mark's mother tore at my mother's collar through gritted teeth. Why couldn't you even look after one child? Why did it have to be my Kathy who died? Did you kill her? Give me back my Kathy. My mother knelt on the ground, full of remorse and pain. In the crowd, I saw Mark pale in the face. He was being shielded by a police officer, not allowed to see his sister, who was covered in blood. I stood frozen in place. The Kathy who had been laughing just moments ago now lay on the ground. Half an hour ago, she had been running around our house with a balloon in her hand. While Mark's mother was busy, she entrusted Kathy to my mother temporarily. My mother was cooking in the kitchen, and when Kathy got tired of playing, she climbed onto the windowsill. The balloon was outside the window, and she wanted to reach it. When I returned from school, I saw a crowd of people downstairs. Mark's mother would come to my mother's workplace every now and then, yelling at her and crying loudly downstairs at our house. Every time, my mother would kneel and cry, and seeing her cry made me cry too. One day, my mother got into a car accident after work. I was taken to the morgue by the head teacher, who held me as we cried. The policewoman too was wiping tears, and I saw my mother lying there barefoot. I went up and covered her feet, hoping to warm her up a bit. Grace, Mom is so tired. I'm sorry to Mark's family. I wish it was me who died. Grace, Mom often dreams that your dad has come back. Is he here to take me away? But Grace, what will you do? I hugged my mother, begging her not to leave me. Mom will continue to live, carrying the guilt. How did Mom, who promised to live and ask for forgiveness, break her promise? Mark's father brought me back home, and Mark's mother hysterically shouted at me to leave, while Mark hugged me and hid in the room. He looked at me indifferently and said, "This will be your home from now on." Gone from his eyes were the tenderness and joy, replaced by indifference and resignation. Mark started avoiding me, and I no longer saw smiles from Mark's parents. The house was filled with crying and cursing sounds. Mark's mother pointed at me and cursed, "Why wasn't it you who died?" She called me a jinx, saying that everyone around me was unlucky. I scrubbed my school uniform in the winter, the icy water and soap causing the cuts on my hands to sting even more. My tears fell into the basin, disappearing with the bubbles. When I looked up, I saw Mark staring at me, frowning before walking into his room. That night, when I returned to my room, I found a hand cream on the table. Later, when Mark's mother tried to hit and scold me again, Mark would pull me away and take the blame for the beatings. Watching him being hit, I cried uncontrollably. He would silently wipe away my tears, being my support. Mark's mother wanted to send me to relatives in the countryside, and I fell asleep in the dark truck, thinking how nice it would be to die in an accident while asleep, so I could reunite with my parents when I woke up. I was woken up by Mark, who had chased me on a bicycle all night, holding my hand and saying he'd take me home. I shook my head, saying it was not my home. "Your home is my home," he insisted, holding my hand tightly as we walked slowly down the dark road. "Are you scared, Mark?" I asked. He shook his head, pointing at the moon in the sky. "As long as there's the moon, there's nothing to be afraid of." I nodded, feeling as though the moon above truly protected us like a shield. Mark's mother hit him with an ashtray, calling him a traitor for betraying his sister, and calling me a blood-sucking jinx. With blood flowing down his head, Mark smiled at me and said, "Grace, don't be afraid, it doesn't hurt." But from then on, he treated me as a replacement for his sister. Later, I became the little sister constantly behind Mark, changing my surname to match his. He treated me like a brother, always protecting me. He would save his allowance to buy me pretty hair accessories, defend me against bullies, and carry my heavy school bag. He introduced me proudly as his little sister to everyone. He walked me through countless dark nights, always the first one there when I faced difficulties. In my freshman year, he had just graduated and had more sophisticated girls around him. I realized I didn't just see him as a brother anymore, but rather, I loved him and wanted to be with him. I confessed my feelings, and to my surprise, he hesitated before agreeing. I was prepared for rejection, but he rented a place near my school, and I would cook for him when I had no classes. It was the happiest time of my life. Later, he got into a fight defending his friends, and got sentenced to 5 years for manslaughter. After prison, he struggled to find a job. Despite his previous dreams and ambitions, now he works in a club. I couldn't understand why he turned violent, just like I couldn't fathom why he would give up on us now. I always chased that light for 12 years. How could it now shine on someone else? I found where Mark lived now, not far from me. I saw him with another woman, and he angrily confronted me. My heartache was unbearable. He was more than just a brother to me. How could he abandon what we had? But I couldn't give up. 12 years reduced to 3 words, a new life. She found me on a weekend, carrying a bag of fruits. Not seeing Mark around, she said she came alone as he had something to do. She stayed for a while before inviting her in. "Dear sister, come in and have a seat," I said. The rented apartment was the same one Mark had 5 years ago. The walls were covered with our photos, his traces were everywhere. She remarked on our close relationship, and I couldn't help but think, yes, he was my ex-boyfriend. She invited me to their wedding. Seeing her joy at becoming a mother, I felt a wave of panic. I tried to hide it with a gulp of water, saying I would come. Passing by a bridal shop, after a company party, My eyes lingered on the beautiful white wedding dresses in the window, lost in my own thoughts. Helen joked, "Do you like it? Let your boyfriend studying abroad buy it for you." I blushed with embarrassment, imagining Mark coming out and dragging him straight to this bridal shop. Everyone says I have a boyfriend studying abroad and often joke about how great he must be to make me wait for him so faithfully for 5 years. Despite some hidden difficulties, I am generally happy inside. With work pressure and Helen sensing my sadness, she asked, "Don't tell me you've had a breakup." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. "The boyfriend you waited for 5 years, right?" I nodded again. Helen hugged me tightly. "It's not a big deal, sis. I'll arrange a singles party for you tonight. I'll invite all the quality single guys I know for you to choose from. How about that?" The corners of my mouth turned up through my tears. At the party, when my colleagues found out that my boyfriend of 5 years had dumped me, they were all outraged. "Grace, there are plenty of men out there, you see. There are ready-made ones right here." Several single guys in the company were teased by everyone. These girls were so indifferent to others' feelings, and I felt ashamed as I lowered my head to drink. A guy came over to toast me, and I blushed as I downed a large glass. The teasing and laughter continued, and feeling embarrassed, I stood up and said I needed to go to the restroom. Standing at the restroom door was a familiar figure. Mark had a cigarette in his mouth, surrounded by smoke, looking at me with a complex expression and a hint of displeasure. He stared at me quietly, not saying a word. Thinking he didn't want to talk to me, I walked into the restroom without saying much. As soon as I walked in, the scent of aromatherapy tea hit me, making me feel nauseous. Painful memories flashed through my mind. My stomach churned, and I couldn't hold back anymore and vomited. When I came out, Mark was nowhere to be seen. As the party ended, Helen insisted on driving me home. The guy who had toasted me earlier blushed, and said he could drop me off since we were going in the same direction. "Could you make sure our Grace gets home safely? If anything happens to her, I'll hold you accountable," warned Helen, patting the guy's shoulder firmly. On the way, the guy tried various topics to chat with me. He was a gentleman and considerate person, and if it wasn't for Mark in my heart, I might have liked him. After saying goodbye to him and walking only a few steps, a strong force pulled me against the wall. My back hit the wall, causing me to cry out in pain. Mark leaned down, looking at me with sharp eyes, a heavy smell of smoke and alcohol emanating from him. His fingers caressed my lower lip back and forth before he unexpectedly kissed me. It was urgent and fierce, as if trying to prove something. Realizing he was about to get married, I pushed him away with force. He touched his lips and chuckled, saying, as expected, "You felt nothing." He leaned in closer, with an alluring look in his eyes. "Grace, would you be my good little sister for life? I'm getting married. Do you have any blessings for me?" I leaned against the wall blankly, feeling empty, walking down a dark road without a moon, seeming endless. This feeling was just like what happened at that hotel 5 years ago. Mark's father needed surgery and money, so I took an internship at a company to ease the burden on my family. Little did I know I would be set up by someone. The company leader drugged my drink while I was in the restroom. I called and messaged Mark, begging him to come save me. There was noise and laughter on the other end of the phone call, the sound of a girl laughing. Mark hung up. I heard the blaring of sirens on the street outside and urgent knocking on the door. A bald man with a gold chain around his neck and a bulky figure tore open my clothes, leering at me. "Don't scream. Your brother won't come to save you. Say something nice, and I might treat you gently." As the drugs took effect, I couldn't make a sound, wanting to struggle, but having no strength. The dim light above my head seemed to sway wildly, and the scent of aromatherapy tea in the hotel made me nauseous. I closed my eyes in despair. Right before losing consciousness, I thought I saw my parents coming to save me, my mother even wearing an apron and holding a rolling pin. A voice said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here," and then my eyes couldn't stay open. Coming out of the flashback, I faced his gaze and smiled lightly. "Then I wish you deep love like the long wind. The moonlight is beautiful. Shall we walk until the end?" He grinned and replied with just one word, "Okay." On the day of Mark's wedding, a table was set up with guests. They all knew about Mark and me, and the dinner table was devoid of the usual jokes, leaving an unusually quiet atmosphere. I stood up unsteadily holding a wine glass. "I'll toast to you all, may you grow old together." After the toast, I downed the glass, then happily drank with a few other guys nearby. I got so drunk that I passed out, and was carried back by Ethan. During the 5 years Mark was away, Ethan helped take care of me. We grew up together, and he truly treated me like a younger sister. I lay on Ethan's back, tears wetting his back. Choking on my words, I asked, "Ethan, why doesn't my brother like me anymore?" Ethan comforted me. "Grace, listen to me. Don't hold a grudge against your brother. Can you start living your life well again in the future? I had no right to hold a grudge. I owed him from the beginning. For a long time after that, I lived alone, never seeing Mark again. I met Ethan twice, only having a meal together without mentioning Mark. On the day Mark's daughter was born, he posted a status about both mother and daughter being safe. He loved children so much. He must be extremely happy. His daughter must resemble him a lot. I had long decided to let go of my obsessive love, and hadn't awakened in tears for a long time. I often worked late writing plans, and the project had produced good results. Busy with work, I had no time to dwell on the past. Everything was going well until the day of my birthday, when I received a diagnosis report confirming that I had advanced stomach cancer. I found myself hiding in the hospital stairwell, not knowing what to do, and unconsciously dialed Mark's phone number. A woman's voice answered, "Grace, your brother is feeding the baby, can't talk right now, what's up?" I tried to control my trembling voice. "No, just wanted to ask if everything is okay between you and my brother." I could hear Mark soothing the child in the background. "We're fine." I forced a smile. "That's good to hear, sis-in-law. I have something else to attend to, I'll let you go." After hanging up the phone, I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. This was my 26th birthday, my cancer-stricken 26th birthday, not knowing how long I had to live at 26. I thought I had moved on, but at that moment, I was overwhelmed by a crazy longing for Mark. I even considered ignoring all consequences, showing him my diagnosis report, telling him I was dying, and desperately begging him to come back to me. I realized how much I loved Mark. I regretted leaving him back then. Perhaps we were better off not meeting each other, as he had once said. Helen took care of everything after finding out about my illness, arranging for my medical leave, crowdfunding, and applying for work-related injuries. While we ate, she piled my plate with food, pretending to be angry. "What did I tell you? Take care of yourself." With my mouth full, I laughed carelessly. "Don't worry, dear sister, I'm lucky." She flashed a hint of sadness in her eyes, and showed me news on her phone. "Don't worry, with advances in medicine, as long as you cooperate with the doctor, keep a positive attitude every day, you'll get better." I nodded. "I'll be fine, I'm lucky." One day at the hospital, I saw a terminal cancer patient, thin, with sparse hair, dark skin, sitting on a stone bench enjoying the warmth of the sun, with a peaceful look in her eyes, devoid of fear and anxiety. Perhaps soon I would look like her. After this meal, I would be admitted for chemotherapy. Before that happened, I wanted to see Mark one last time, with this seemingly healthy and young body. I waited outside the club until Mark emerged. This time he came out quickly. He put out his cigarette, looked at me intently. His cheeks had filled out a bit. He could live well without me, which reassured me. His tone was cold. "My wife and I are moving to another city in a couple of days, settling down there. Don't come looking for me here anymore. Call if you have something important." "Is that so?" I wanted to tell him I was being transferred by the company, leaving next week, and say goodbye to him. He stared at me, hesitated for a while. "Good," I hummed, resisting the urge to hug him. He came over, tousled my head, hesitated, withdrew his hand, sighed, then turned back into the club. He disappeared from view. I stood still. "Goodbye, Mark." I stayed in the hospital for nearly half a year, either chatting gossip with the nurses at the station, or flirting with the male doctors doing rounds. I held their hands and asked for their information. Sometimes, the head nurse couldn't bear it. "Grace, where are you reaching your hand?" I skillfully pulled back my hand, joking, strengthening doctor-patient relationships. During this time, Helen visited me frequently, fussing like a parent. I didn't expect to see Ethan. Standing solemnly by the bed, he asked, "Does your brother know?" I begged him not to tell Mark, and he hesitantly promised to keep it a secret. As he left, he gazed at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "It's really unfair." I smiled. "Ethan, if I die, please tell Mark something for me. Just say I'm buried next to my mom." Of course, he probably won't want to come. I became easily fatigued and sleepy, rarely awake. I started coughing up blood, and the nurses who usually chatted with me discreetly wiped away tears as they saw me in pain. I had become too weak to make the nurses laugh. Recently, many doctors and nurses had been coming to the ward. I knew they were coming to bid goodbye. Ethan eventually broke his promise. "Mark," did tears fill his eyes? What was he saying? I couldn't hear anymore. "Mark, you shouldn't be sad. I'm the one who made you unhappy." I couldn't make out the words shouted around me. I was tired. Goodbye. Epilogue. Yesterday was the spring equinox. The blue cherry blossoms on the street had already bloomed. Every day, as I passed this path on my way to deliver water, I would occasionally look up at the sea of purple when waiting for the traffic lights. As usual, I watched the students in groups of 2 or 3, stepping on the purple petals with lively and innocent expressions on their faces, reminiscing about the passing of their youth. After school, I would always be the first to rush out of the classroom to the junior high department, spotting Grace in the bustling crowd, then heading home together. We would step on the dry leaves, and she would joyfully share funny stories from class while I quietly listened. When she fell silent, she would pick up an oddly shaped leaf. "Mark, look at this leaf." With a radiant smile on her face, she would carefully tuck the leaf into the inner layer of her backpack. On my 18th birthday, she gave me a photo album filled with leaves of different shapes attached to it. Before making a wish, Grace whispered in my ear, "I want to give the best things to Mark." Crossing my hands tightly, I closed my eyes and made a wish. May Grace grow up carefree and happy. Memories flooded back, and tears streamed down my face. A schoolgirl in uniform looked at me. "Uncle, why are you crying?" I swiftly wiped my tears with my sleeve and said with a smile, "These flowers are so beautiful, they made me cry." The girl, looking puzzled, walked away with her friend. I missed her. I missed the girl who always followed me, giving me the best things. But I had lost her forever. I wondered what she was doing in a foreign country right now. Perhaps she was embracing a new boyfriend in a romantic restaurant, or shopping and doing nails with her girlfriends. Her life should be all brightness now, and I will pray for her to live a peaceful and happy life in a place she doesn't know about. The phone rang. It was Ethan, whom I hadn't talked to in a long time. He said a lot of things, but all I heard was, "She's dying." I felt like Grace was tricking me into showing up, that everyone was just acting out a play for her. But as I saw her weak and filled with tubes in the hospital bed, it felt like falling off a cliff. She should have been living a glamorous life abroad. When we meet again, she should have looked down on me, saying, "Mark, you see, I can live just fine without you." Instead, she was lying in bed about to die. I knelt by her bedside, holding her hand, pleading for her to get up. "I was wrong, Grace. I won't disappear. I only love you, and I lied to you. Please get up, let's go home." "Grace, I love you." But my Grace flew away. I thought I could protect her, but I missed her forever. The first time I met Grace, I was 12. Dad said to take care of their sister. Kathy died, and she became my sister. Mom said let her replace Kathy, but I knew she wasn't Kathy. Mom disliked her, treated her poorly, even wanted to send her away. The day I found out she was sent to the countryside after school, I rode my bike desperately to catch up. My bike smoked from being ridden so hard. That was the first time I felt such an urgent desire to see her, thinking that if I promised to protect her, I had to do it. In the dark cargo box, she looked like an abandoned puppy on the side of the road. When she saw me, hope showed in her eyes. I knew from then on, I had to protect her all the way. On the dark road, she followed closely behind me, whispering, "Mark, are you scared?" I pointed to the moon and shook my head. Mom called me a traitor. I missed Kathy, missed her holding my hand with a smile, but she had already flown away. I understood Mom's despair, but making a kind-hearted person bear the consequences was truly unreasonable. The first time I realized I liked Grace was when she invited me to watch her stage play at school. She played Snow White, shining on stage like a star. After the performance, her classmates cheered for her and the male lead to be together. I was not happy inside, jealous of the boys around her, so I left without a word and pretended to be too busy to watch at the time. However, to my surprise, Grace confessed to me when she entered college. It should have been something I did first, so being outpaced made me feel a bit guilty. I nodded, pretending to be calm on the surface, but feeling a chaotic mess inside. I enjoyed seeing her smile, liked watching over her while she slept. Having me by her side made her seem at peace, but the truth was, I couldn't leave her. I couldn't bear to think of the days without her. So, in those 5 years, it felt like I lived through centuries, but I didn't regret it, because I had to protect her. 5 years ago, at a class reunion with Ethan, Grace called for help. Amidst the chaos, I only heard those 2 words, "Save me." Upon seeing the message, I hurried to find her only to see her unconscious on the bed. I fought with the man, punching him repeatedly in the face. Unexpectedly, when I ran out of strength, he grabbed a chair and struck me. I couldn't dodge and took a heavy blow. As he continued to hit me, in extreme anger, I grabbed a candlestick from the table and hit him on the head. The man died, and I was sentenced to 5 years. During those 5 years, I refused to see Grace, maintaining only written communication. I asked Ethan to tell her that I accidentally killed someone in a fight at a class reunion. In prison, I was isolated and bullied until an elderly man with white hair helped me. Every time I felt hopeless, he, like a sage, guided and encouraged me. Slowly, I emerged from the darkness, realizing I couldn't stay down. I had to keep protecting Grace. Receiving a letter from Grace in prison was my happiest moment. In her letters, She showed concern, comforted me, and encouraged me. Initially, I thought 5 years would pass in a flash, and I'd come out to marry Grace and be together forever. But one day, I read in the newspaper about an ex-convict's family member committing suicide due to online harassment, and the ex-convict facing difficulties finding a job because of the stigma. I then realized she was young and deserved a better future, and I didn't want her to bear the label of a murderer's wife. At that moment, I decided to break up with her, willing to take on any identity to protect her. On the day of my release, I didn't tell her, but she stood outside the prison gate shivering from the cold. When she saw me, she ran towards me, hugging me with a familiar smile. Mark. My heart, once hollow from longing, suddenly felt complete. I truly loved her. That day, I couldn't resist hugging her. I thought one more embrace, before I bury it deep, and leave would be enough. Following Ethan, I went to a club, thinking the year of our graduation would see me as an excellent designer. Yet, I found myself in the noisy club, laughing with clients. Each night, when I returned home, I was torn between anticipation and agony. I was afraid of not being able to leave her, often smoking downstairs for a long time before going upstairs. When I saw Grace at a gathering with her colleagues, her confident and vibrant appearance was truly charming. She looked up to greet me, but I was scared and fled, not wanting her colleagues to know I existed. Finally, I mustered the courage to speak out about the breakup. I used resolute, unintended words that hurt her deeply. Our next meeting was when I accompanied Shirley for her prenatal checkup. Shirley was the daughter of the old man who looked after me in prison. She was unmarried but pregnant, and her boyfriend's family rejected her due to her father's imprisonment. In her deepest sorrow, I visited her on her father's behalf. Perhaps thinking of oneself as a murderer, I decided to take care of her, and use this as a means to sever all ties with Grace. Shirley also knew about my situation, and played along with me. Maybe we really have acting talent. Grace genuinely believed that she was deeply hurt. I had countless times when I wanted to hold her, kiss her, and tell her my true feelings. The day I saw her with another admirer, I lost control, and kissed her impulsively, even though we were playing our roles perfectly. But I couldn't contain the jealousy and intense longing in my heart. She looked at me blankly, wishing me well. I wanted to walk with her to the end under the moonlight, but I turned back halfway. I thought that this time was truly the end, but 6 months later she found me. She had been sent abroad by the company for 2 years, to a very distant country. She stood cautiously in front of me, much thinner, looking so fragile. I wanted so much to hug her, to encourage her to move forward boldly, to not look back, but the words didn't come out when I tried to speak. It seemed like I was the one reluctant to let go, to hold on to her, and the one who was cowardly and afraid was still me. I should have noticed her illness earlier. That day when she called, maybe she wanted to confide in me, and even though I heard her voice on the phone, I didn't pay any attention. She must have been so scared at that time. When I think about it now, what did I do right? She should be living well with her mother. Why did we have to disturb her? In the end, she stubbornly didn't give me a chance to confess to her face. She left the arrangements to Helen, said goodbye to Ethan, her favorite physician, and the nurses. She wanted to return to the Grace from before she was 8. Holding her cold hand, I cried. I was wrong. I should have been more firm and brave on my way to you. Grace's letter. Mark, by the time you read this letter, I've been gone for a year. I have been actively undergoing treatment. I never gave up on life. It's just like a battle. There are wins and losses. So please don't be too sad for me. I have often prayed fervently in the warm days I thought I would die, not wanting to perish in the dry autumn. I was sick in the autumn. I wanted to hold on. Maybe I could really get my wish. As winter came, I started to struggle. My feet inexplicably cold this year. I was terrified, and every day I woke up alive. It was a gratitude that brought tears. Finally, as spring arrived and a few flowers bloomed outside the window, I smiled. Sincerely praying really worked. I thought of making a cool departure, but it turns out I don't have that talent. So, I asked brother Ethan to pass on a message to you. If you really miss me, come see me. I've had a lot of tough days in my life, and I won't say much about them in the letter. Let me talk about the sweet moments in my life. When I transferred schools and arrived in City A with my mom, parting with friends I've known for years, I was very low. The day I saw you, I was genuinely happy. You were smiling and holding Kathy's hand as you walked towards me, and I saw the most beautiful smile for the first time in my life. My life started to become interesting. You told many stories, and I was captivated by them. The first time you told the story of a raccoon stealing instant noodles from a noodle factory, I believed it was true, and thought raccoons were just born to eat instant noodles. To prove your stories, I argued passionately with my desk partner, only to later learn that your tales were all made up. Honestly, I was really scared in that dark truck container. The moment you woke me up, I thought I was dreaming. That night, I felt that the moon was so beautiful that I followed you without hesitation, from middle school to college, always watching your steps ahead. During the high school play, I actually saw you in the crowd. Although I didn't know why you vehemently denied ever going there, I was truly happy. The day I confessed to you, my heart was full of nerves. I was afraid you'd reject me, and I was prepared to cling to you even if you did. You said yes, but I could tell how nervous you were. When you're nervous, you tend to bite your lip, and I saw that. I think it was you who saved me from falling off the cliff that night. You kept your word and saved me. Looking back, I would have realized sooner that you were the only one who called me little obedient. All these are the sweetness in my life, all thanks to you. After you were released from prison, you often remained silent. During those 5 years, it seemed like your body was imprisoned, but it was torturing your soul. I want to tell you, just living is already good enough. Don't fear the rumors and gossip, because in my eyes, no one compares to how good you are, Mark. Keep moving forward. The moonlight shines brightly. Just boldly move forward.